Somewhere right now, someone thinks they've disappeared. New name, new haircut, new city. They paid cash for everything, ditched their old phone, and told themselves, nobody will ever find me again. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The FBI doesn't need to know your new name. They just need one thread. One. Because the moment you touch a fingerprint scanner, a DNA swab, a bank account, or even a cousin who still loves you, that thread gets pulled, and the whole disguise unravels. Today, we're going inside the real science, the real databases, and the real cases that prove. In modern America, disappearing completely might be the hardest job on earth. I'm going to show you exactly how it's done, and why even the smartest fugitives in history got caught by the smallest, dumbest details. 50 years ago, changing your identity was almost easy. You could get a new social security card by mail. You could build a whole legal identity just by copying the name of a dead child born the same year as you. A trick criminals used for decades called ghosting. No fingerprint databases talk to each other. No state shared photos with another state. If you crossed a state line and picked a new name, you were basically a new person on paper. But that world is gone. Today, over 152 million criminal and civil fingerprint records sit inside one FBI system alone, a system called NGI, the Next Generation Identification Database. It doesn't just store fingerprints. It stores palm prints, iris scans, and photographs, all cross-searchable in seconds. The myth of just start over somewhere new that miracle plan people talk about was already dying by the 1990s. Today, it's basically a fantasy. Here's the part people forget. You don't need to be famous for the FBI to already have a piece of you. If you've ever been arrested, fingerprinted for a job, joined the military, or even applied for certain licenses, your prints are very likely already sitting inside a federal system. The FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division runs biometric matching that can search millions of records in minutes. Not weeks. Minutes. And it's not just fingerprints anymore. In North Carolina, FBI analysts ran facial recognition software against 30 million DMV driver's license photos to track down a double homicide suspect named Rodolfo Corrales, who had built a new identity under a new name. The system flagged 28 different photos of the same man using different identities. One face, 28 names. It didn't matter how many times he reinvented himself. His bone structure, the width of his chin, the shape of his nose, stayed exactly the same. He was arrested in North Carolina, far from where his crime happened, because a photo he took for something as boring as a driver's license gave him away. Think about that. A new identity almost always requires new paperwork. A license, a lease, a job application. And that paperwork almost always requires a photo. That photo becomes the new thread they pull. Let's go deeper than your face. Let's go into your cells. The FBI runs a system called CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, which links together over 1 million offender DNA profiles from labs across the country. If your DNA was ever collected during an arrest, it's very likely already logged and waiting, silent, for a match. But here's the part that changed everything in 2018. A cold case investigator named Paul Holes had DNA from a string of unsolved murders and rapes committed decades earlier by a man known only as the Golden State Killer. No name. No match in the criminal database. So investigators tried something new. They uploaded the DNA profile to a public genealogy website called GEDmatch, a site normal people use to find long-lost relatives. The killer himself had never used the site, but his distant cousins had. Investigators found people who shared small fragments of DNA with the killer, third and fourth cousins, and used that to build out a family tree, branch by branch, narrowing thousands of possible relatives down to one name, Joseph James DeAngelo, a 72-year-old former police officer living quietly in Citrus Heights, California. He hadn't uploaded his own DNA anywhere. He didn't need to. His relatives did it for him. Investigators secretly collected a discarded tissue from his trash to confirm the match. And on April 24, 2018, they arrested him. 44 years of hiding, ended by a family tree he never built himself. This is the terrifying part for anyone trying to vanish. You can protect your own DNA perfectly, but you can't control your cousins. Technology gets all the credit, but honestly, most fugitives aren't caught by a machine. They're caught by a person who once loved them. Take James Whitey Bulger, one of the most violent crime bosses in Boston's history, wanted for 19 murders. He vanished in 1994 and stayed hidden for 16 years, one of the longest fugitive runs in FBI history. He and his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg, built quiet new lives in Santa Monica, California, under the names Charles and Carol Gasco. Neighbors described them as an average, boring, older couple. That was the whole plan. Disappear by being forgettable. But the FBI knew something personal about Gregg. She loved cosmetic dental work and plastic surgery, so agents ran television ads, not about Bulger, the dangerous killer, but about her. Her love of manicures, her trips to the dentist, aimed specifically at daytime TV audiences, at women watching talk shows. Within a day, a tip came in from a former neighbor who was actually living in Iceland at the time, a former beauty queen who recognized Gregg's face from the news segment. She'd noticed the same woman was kind to a stray cat in her old neighborhood. That single phone call ended a 16-year manhunt. Bulger was arrested the very next morning in a parking garage. 19 murders, 16 years of hiding, ended by a woman's love of manicures and a stray cat. Now here's something almost nobody thinks about when they imagine hiding. The way you write and talk is its own kind of fingerprint. For 17 years, a bomber known only as the Unabomber terrorized the country, mailing explosives to universities and airlines, killing 3 people and injuring 23 more. Nobody knew his name. Then in 1995, he demanded that newspapers publish his 35,000-word manifesto, or he'd keep killing. The FBI agreed, hoping someone, somewhere, would recognize the writing style. It worked. A man named David Kaczynski read the published manifesto and recognized strange, specific phrases his estranged brother Ted used to say. Things like cool-headed logicians and an odd habit of saying rearing children instead of raising children, a phrase pattern common to a specific region of Chicago. David brought old letters from his brother to the FBI. Trained linguists compared the sentence structure, word choice, and even punctuation habits between the letters and the manifesto, and confirmed. It was almost certainly the same author. In April 1996, agents arrested Ted Kaczynski in a tiny handmade cabin in Montana with no electricity or running water. 17 years of hiding from every camera and database in the country, undone by his own vocabulary, recognized by his own brother. Even if you dodge every camera, every database, every relative, you still have to eat. You still need a place to sleep, and that means eventually you touch money. New identities almost always crack under financial pressure. A fake social security number often gets flagged instantly when an employer runs it because it may already belong to someone else or to someone who died years ago, a method investigators specifically watch for. Banks are required to report certain transactions and flag unusual account behavior. Landlords run background checks. Utility companies want a name tied to a payment history. Every one of these is a small door with a lock, and every lock leaves a record of who tried to open it. This is why the FBI's white-collar and fugitive units don't just chase faces. They chase paper trails. New bank accounts opened in a new name, employment records, apartment leases, even prescription refills. Because it's incredibly hard to build a whole new financial life from nothing without leaving a pattern that stands out. A person who suddenly exists on paper at 35 years old, with no childhood, no school records, no old addresses. That absence itself becomes a red flag. Even people the government itself hides sometimes get found. The U.S. Marshals Run Witness Security Program has protected thousands of witnesses since the 1970s by giving them entirely new, legally issued identities. New names, new histories, new paperwork, built by the government itself, not forged in some back room. And still, participants have been located over the years, almost always for the same very human reason. They broke protocol. They called an old friend. They returned to a hometown for a funeral. They posted something online that connected 2 lives that were never supposed to touch. If a government-built, fully legal identity can fail because of one emotional decision, it tells you everything about identities built alone, with far fewer resources and far more mistakes. So what does all of this actually mean? It means the old idea of starting over as some clean, invisible reset simply doesn't exist anymore. Not with biometric databases holding hundreds of millions of records, facial recognition systems, comparing your face to driver's licenses in other states, DNA genealogy sites built by strangers who happen to share your blood, and the simple, unavoidable fact that humans are creatures of habit, connection, and love. The FBI doesn't need to be everywhere at once. They just need one thread. A fingerprint from years ago, a cousin's ancestry test, a phrase you always say, a phone call you couldn't resist making. Every fugitive in this video thought they'd built something airtight. Every single one of them was undone by something achingly human. So the next time someone tells you they could disappear completely, if they ever needed to, ask them what they'd do about their fingerprints, their DNA, their face, their family. Because in the end, the hardest person to hide from isn't the FBI. It's yourself.